going to share with you guys a little bit about my journey in STEM and some of the pathways that got me to work on this project, and also some maybe useful advice for this industry as a whole and having a career working on apps and being in tech. So the way I've set it up here is I'm going to start off, tell my story a little bit. I have some pictures to share. And after that, I'm going to show you my standard pitch deck. That's what this is. But instead of pitching to you like I would to an investor group or a formal thing, I'm going to be more like talking behind the scenes of why I put this in there, or why this is important, or that kind of thing, like the behind the scenes. So you get an idea of the skills that come into play in this business, even if it's not just STEM. That's not my specialty. My partner and father, Mark, will come up and discuss more of the in-depth, technical details of our app and the linguistics and that side of things. But I just want to start by going over a little bit of my story here. So, let's see. So it starts for me with, this is a language learning app, right? So I got interested in learning languages when I was in high school, and I got really into Japanese. I just love the culture, and I wanted to visit there, and I just love the food and everything. So I got really into it, and so that was a big reason that I wanted to go to UH when I was an undergrad. So this was 8 years ago. I started at UH, and these pictures here, the first two show my first day. I think this is my first day, or one of my first days in the Japanese class at UH, and I was really intimidated. I had done a little bit of self-study, but they wanted me to go right into the earliest stage, 101. And then, you can kind of tell in this picture, the teacher at the end of the day wanted us to take a picture of the board for all our homework and stuff like that. And from day one, this is maybe a couple weeks in, she's already starting to change some of the stuff into Japanese, like hiragana. And then eventually, by the end of the semester, there was no more English, right? So there's this immersion element that was really helpful for me. So I showed these two pictures, and this is kind of the class that I took for Japanese. I showed these pictures to highlight how it started for me, which was just an interest in the language, just wanting to speak and be understood, and ultimately I wanted to study abroad in Japan, which I ended up doing through UH, and that was a great experience, which I'll get to. But my major at this time, was economics, and I was minoring in Japanese. The reason I did that, so there's no STEM really, right? But the reason I did that was I had been following these influencers who were like foreign Americans or from any country that had moved to Japan. A lot of them were teaching English, but I was like trying to learn what's it like to live in Japan. So they would tell me in the videos, they would share if you want to have a career in Japan as a foreigner, then and you don't want to teach English only, then you should have some other skills, some other marketable skills besides being bilingual, which is also very important. So I figured, okay, economics is like a kind of a broad category. I took one class in high school, and I thought it was interesting enough, and I liked some of the theory of it, and I felt like it could apply to business and to other things, which I'll get to, and I think it has. But I say that to say that, when I meet people today, when they say, what did you study, I always go to Japanese first, because people get more of a reaction, oh, that's cool, what do you like anime or whatever, it starts the conversation. Whereas economics can be a little dry for people. And it got a little dry for me, and that's going to be coming into the story, even though I still love it and utilize those skills in my business today as well. So then, let's see. Next thing was, I finally, after 1 year at UH, I participated in this student exchange program with UH, and I got to go to Japan. I got to study there. I actually went to 2 different universities. One was a summer program at Waseda in Tokyo, and the other one is this one in the picture, which is Keio University. And it was my top choice to go over, in Japan they had 20 options if you're, from UH. We have a lot of agreements with Japan, but Keio was the one everyone wanted to go to. And there's only 2 students that get selected every year to go study, do an exchange. And then Keio sends 2 of their students to UH. So it was a very, very tough program. It was much harder to get into KO than it was to UH, which was, not the easiest, but KO was very tough. I got a letter of recommendation from my Japanese professor, which was really, really helpful. And I think, and there's a funny story on that, if I have time, which is, I was really into Japanese. I was studying on my own a lot, and I got really ahead of the class, because I just loved to study all the time, and I was like immersed in it. So when I went to there's a final paper at the end of the semester, and you were supposed to maybe do 1 or 2 pages, and I did 5 or 6 pages. It was a bunch of kanji and a bunch of complicated stuff that everyone else in the class wasn't at that level, because I was doing it myself. So the professor of that class, who turns out to be the head of the whole Asian language department at UH, she called me into her class in her room and said, I see your paper and I don't believe you did this yourself. I'd like you to prove this to me. Go line by line and tell me you know all this stuff. And I was able to prove that I knew it, and so I think that showed that, that passion I had. And so I give her the credit how I got into KO, but the experience was amazing, and this was a hotel in Tokyo across from the Imperial Palace. This was my first day. I even took a picture of the plane when I was first arriving, because I was so stoked to be going over there and seeing Mount Fuji, and it just had the food everything's amazing, right? But of course, the best part of this whole journey and where it ties into what I'm working on today wasn't just I don't know what happened there. The best part of it, I accidentally shut it off. Sorry, Rita, I pressed the wrong button.
Oh, let's get that back.
Thank you. So these pictures are, for some reason, not showing up. I don't know, it's probably my last minute change. So I'll just explain what these will be, and we'll move on quickly. This was the best part. The best part was the people. So these are me with all my friends, which you can imagine, I made a bunch of friends. Made friends here, and I guess this actually ties in maybe to this image, so you get a kind of an idea for these pictures. But UH had this great program for language exchange, where I could, anybody who's a student there, if you're taking Japanese or any other language, you can get into groups and they match you with international students from that country who want to learn English. And you guys can get together and become friends and talk and, share. And that program was so useful for me. My Japanese got pretty good when I was here, and then when I went to Japan, it got a lot better because we were forced to use it, right? Through the immersion, you really can't even speak English to a lot of people if you don't know it. So this was what you would have seen on this next slide, but it was basically all of the friendships and connections that I made. And we'll skip past that, but that was the part that drew me into it, and I still have friends to this day that I met from here, and I met when I was over there in Japan. And one other funny thing I'll say is when I went to KO for a year, 2 semesters, my Japanese wasn't good enough to take all the classes in Japanese, at the university level, and I was taking economics and international business and stuff like that. So I had to they had plenty of room for people to take it in English, right? We had a bunch of foreign people from all over the world. But what happened was, because KO's campus is in this foreign district in Tokyo called Roppongi, and there's a bunch of foreigners there, and all the people in my class were English speakers, my Japanese actually got a lot worse during that year because I never had to use it. I was just in this bubble of English. And you hear this from a lot of expats and people who go to another country and they don't immerse enough. So I was noticing, man, my Japanese is not improving at the rate it was when I was doing all the partnerships and the language exchange and stuff like that. And so then to fast forward a little bit, my time in Japan comes to an end, my visa is up, and I come back to Hawaii to finish up my studies, and that happens to be when the pandemic hits, March 2020, so it's because of the timing of the schools is different. So I came back and boom, everything gets shut down. So a lot of uncertainty out there, and I remember UH was gonna have for that next semester, it was gonna be all virtual. There was gonna be no in-person, it was gonna be no discount on tuition. So I was thinking, let me just take a break from that for 1 semester and kind of see what's gonna happen. And so at that time, I wanted to keep my language skills going up, right? I was really hoping to come back to Japan and have a career there. I knew I needed to get better at it. So I couldn't go to the classes, right? And I was helping, and I couldn't do the language exchange with all the new friends because no one was coming in. And I couldn't even go back to Japan for years for immersion because of the policies. So that's when I went and looked on online solutions. I downloaded Duolingo, I downloaded Babbel, I tried different apps that I wasn't really using before. And that's when I stumbled upon this issue that we kind of start. This is the beginning of my formal pitch, but this is where we start. What is the problem? In any kind of business or startup, you're trying to solve a problem that's out there. And people ask me that. Duolingo's a huge company. Why are you making this app? Well, that's because there's so many reasons that people can't get to that level. Like I didn't get to the conversational level in Japanese. And I think these are some of the reasons we've identified. But it comes down to methodology. And what I would say about that is apps like Duolingo and kind of those standard apps, they focus a lot on memorization and flashcards and like learning scripts and stuff like that. And there's not as much of that natural conversational element that you need. Think of how you learn your mother tongue. It wasn't studying flashcards, right? It was hearing your parents, hearing people around you growing up, hearing the language, being immersed in it, and then just producing it naturally, making mistakes and learning as you go. And there really wasn't a good way for an app to really give you that experience before. So I can't really totally blame the companies, but that's what was out there, a few years ago. So what we saw was kind of created a matrix of like what works and what doesn't work as well, and then also like what's affordable, right? So apps, I know people who've used the Duolingo for 1,000 days in a row, and they're still struggling to have a basic conversation in Spanish or whatever language they're learning. But people get addicted to that streak and everything like that, right? And then books can be pretty good. They can be a little more expensive, but you can't really practice speaking those books as much, right? You can do like kind of rote, like saying the words out loud, and that's fine. But it's better when you're in a class or immersed, because then you have to use it. And we really identified that tutoring was one of the best, because it kind of takes the best of these different methods, right? It's not like a class of 20 other learners. That can give you bad habits if you're talking to just the other learners. So you only have the one teacher, and with immersion, you're thrown into the fire. And I got used to that, but that can be tough too. And so the tutoring is really great, because this is somebody who's an expert in the language, like a native speaker, or they're bilingual, and they totally focused on you as a learner. Like how do you learn? Where are you struggling? What are your pain points? What are you interested in? And can work with you to, like, especially with speaking, but with everything, they can kind of craft a curriculum for you that keeps you engaged. And this is how the most serious people in the world, this is how they get people trained up on languages, like the military and all sorts of, like diplomats and things like that. This is how they do it, is they send up these people to a tutor, and it's really intensive for 3 months. They have the immersion, they have the textbook stuff, but the tutoring it keeps them engaged. But tutor can be a little expensive, and not everyone has that option, and that's where we feel like our app is going to fill that gap, because it basically is simulating what a human tutor would be with AI, which is something you could have only done recently with the emerging technology of AI that's conversational AI, so generative AI, large language models. So we'll get into that a little bit more in detail with the other presentation, but I just want to show this is how I start, because this is also like a behind the scenes, right? So this is how I would start with any presentation. For instance, we did one last week at the Entrepreneur Sandbox. Amazon Web Service had a competition. We had shown this very pitch without the pictures. And you really want to, I think you want to start heavily on that problem and get people believing that problem exists, and also tying into your story. That really helps. I got feedback from angel investors and from entrepreneurs that if you have a good story at the beginning and they know what you're working on, then the details I'll kind of skip over some of these details, they're not as important. This part's important, so this is the next slide, but you got to go over this quickly too. I've been tripped up on this before, which is our methodology. Why, what makes you different? What makes you unique? Why doesn't Duolingo have this? Well, they're not using some of these things. So I'll just briefly mention our big person that you're going to hear more about is Dr. Stephen Krashen, and he is considered the father of modern day linguistics. He's still alive, but he came up with a theory in the 80s called comprehensible input. And that just postulates that people don't learn languages, they actually acquire them by understanding messages through context. And when I thought about that, when I first heard about him from my UH professors, I thought, it's an interesting thought. Like, when I was getting better at Japanese, like I would have a conversation, right? And I would try to produce the language like a whole sentence. And maybe I wouldn't know one word. I'd be like tripped up on that, and I'd use English, and then thankfully they would understand me, and they'd tell me, oh, well, here's what you could have said. This is the Japanese way to say that. And basically that's what he's teaching, and that's what he's proposing is you want to be able to understand most of the sentence and have one or two new things, like 5% of it you don't get, and then you can fill that in. And if you keep gradually doing that from the basic level to the advanced level, that's how you can kind of continuously progress and get more advanced and be able to produce more types of sentences and things like that. So we have a few other kind of linguistics details that help, that we use, and Duolingo doesn't use some of these, which is funny, like optimization, 80-20 rules. We show the most useful, the words that come up the most. And I think we'll have that more in our next presentation. But like, for instance, Duolingo has I used it a little bit, and in the first like 2 or 3 lessons, they're going to teach you the word hippopotamus, which is fine, but they teach you that before dog or cat. So it's not like very useful language at the beginning. So we focus on all the useful words like the, a, in, really basic stuff that will apply to any conversation. And then we have some pronunciation stuff and a different kind of game, which we can potentially get to in our video. And then this is just a little bit on the technical side, but I kept this in. This was the part of our pitch to Amazon, because we use Amazon Web Service, we use their services, and we were basically pitching to get a bunch of free credits, and those are some of the services we use. So if you're familiar with all that technical stuff. I'm not a technical guy, but I've had to learn, and I have learned as we've gone along, like kind of what some of these words mean and what some of this stuff does, like at a high level. Especially when you're the CEO, which that was a title that we were given because I was kind of doing all that business stuff. Then it does help when you can be able to understand at least a little bit of whatever your technical thing for your product is. So I'm not going to get into the weeds on that, but I think we'll get to that later. So it's always good on a slide to show also why now. And then I think the biggest reason why now, and this will tie into our whole theme, which is STEM, which is the advancements in generative AI and neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. These are other reasons, but we just want to say why now. The investors always want to know that. Why didn't this come out 10 years ago? Well, the main reason is because we're actually coming up on 3 years since ChatGPT was released, and that's kind of when we saw that we could make this chatbot AI tutor. And I think this has been validated by the last year or so. There's been a flurry of new apps coming out that are more similar to us, like JumpSpeak, TalkPal. Some of them are on Instagram, and it's like an AI tutor, right? So this was a technology that can only be introduced now with the technology breakthroughs. So you always got to have that. And then let's see. This is our team. We were kind of described a little bit already. As part of my journey, I just want to mention that, earlier this year, I got contacted by a representative for the State House, and they were just on Instagram, just called me out, just messaged me, DM'd me, and said, hey, I see you're doing some interesting work in tech and AI, you're a local guy, could you come and help us out with some tech problems we're having? So I just came over, and it turned into like an office there and helping them out more frequently and working with the other legislators. So this has been a really cool thing that I would just add them up to the journey. Is you never know where things are gonna take you, right? So if you I don't know, I would just say be open to opportunities, because this opportunity has really helped with like just legitimacy. Having a state email and stuff like that, but also working with these legislators, learning what the problems are, and having like intros to principals at local public schools, right, in their district and things like that for our language app. We have another app that's a tourism app, and that's definitely want to work with the state on that. So I didn't even plan this out, but these opportunities will come when you are kind of doing what we're doing today, going out in the community and giving talks and going to networking events. Really important to just put yourself out there. Try to wrap this up because I don't want to take time away from the STEM talk. This is the interesting part, but this is a big tie-in. I do want to mention here good to have advisors if you can, people that can fill you up and fill you in with areas that you may be lacking in your company. This was my professor that we took the pictures of. I showed you the pictures from her class at UH. She's the head of it. And then this fellow we have to directly give credit to Rita and to the ExLENT program here, because we were able to meet him. He is the disciple of Dr. Krashen that we mentioned earlier. And we tried to contact Krashen. He's at USC. Well, he's totally retired, so we couldn't meet him. But we actually went to the USC campus. We tried to find him, and they said, well, we can't get you Krashen because he's out. But this fellow is his protege, studied under him, worked with him. He's kind of continuing the methodology. He's also a PhD at USC. So we had a call with him, and it was really helpful because we had, a few months ago, on the call with him was our intern, our last intern from this program, Serena, who was amazing. She was just an awesome help, and she was really excited to talk to him because it was the two of us, plus her, talking to this fellow, and I think she came in prepared with some great questions that were, because she's like a linguistics person, so she had all these like really detailed questions for him that he really loved, and I saw them going back and forth. I was so proud, and it was really great because at the end of that, and I could give her the credit, he said, I like what you guys are doing. You seem like serious people, and I want to, keep advising you. And when you guys are ready, we can run a pilot program at USC for your app with the students there. So that was amazing. It was all, I give all the credit to this amazing intern that we got from this program. So hope for more of this good stuff next time. So yeah, great to have the advisors. Great to reach out. I give KCC some credit. Everyone saw that at the pitch last week. So we talked about this is a traction. Always good to have people, the investors want to know what have you done and make it timely so they can see that you are like moving along and you have a work ethic or whatever. But you kind of sometimes you got to like just throw it out. I mean, it's not anything facetious, but I just say that like here, right? We have 1,000 customer discovery. I didn't do 1,000 interviews between June and July. We just got to that point by then. I've been doing that for a year. But you can make it seem more, pump yourself up a little bit because you want, whether it's investors or you just want the general public or whoever to, put on a good look. But it's all legitimate, and this is where we're at now, where we launched our beta last year, Tech Week, Honolulu Tech Week, and at the end we'll have a QR for you guys to try it if you want. So it's live right now on the website, and so good to show your progress. Always good to show your market. Huge market, and this is the standard format. So you show the total giant market, and then the sub market you're going to focus on, and then the sub of that basically. But this will be stuff if you start a startup, then you'll learn this pretty quickly. But this just shows how big our market is and where we think we can go, because people want to know the business side of things, and then a business model as well. And this is like what you'll make in your business plan if you start your own company, right? Is how you gonna make money, right? So basically, we make it pretty simple because we're just like Duolingo. People know that. Right? You can use it for free, showing ads, or you can pay to remove the ads and get some extra features. And we're kind of experimenting right now with how much we want to charge per month, but that's one idea. And then we can also work with schools. Like if we work with USC more intensely, then we could give them like a package, like that's B2B, business to business type of business model. So always, I usually gloss over that a little bit, but yeah, same with our competitors. It really depends on your company, because I've seen some startups where people really need to know what their competitors are, what their business model is. In our case, it's less important because people are already familiar with language learning is a big market, and there's plenty of money to be made, and that's huge, and like what the business model is. So we just show like where we stack up with the other guys, where we think we do, and I'll skip that because we're going to show this. Maybe we'll show this a little bit later in the other presentation, but normally I show that, and I end with. I just recently changed this, but the way I end it is it really helps when you can like show that you know a little bit of another language, because when you're doing this, right? So, I always say, in all the languages I'm studying now, I say thank you, and then I say, and this is Latin, gratias vobis agimus, and then you say in Japanese, domo arigatou gozaimasu, and mahalo no iloa, of course, in Hawaiian. So we'd have a little catchphrase. We'll have another QR code to scan, but I'll leave that up for a minute. And this will be the end of our pitch. So my final thoughts I just want to leave you with, if I'm going a little long, but I want to answer all the questions that we were given here. Is like, yeah, my journey, I want to say that it wasn't linear. It kind of just, the pandemic was really what started it. I wasn't planning to do this before. I wanted to be in finance in Japan. It was totally different. But I think I was open to it. I realized like I've always been interested in languages, and I used to use these apps, and maybe there's an opening there. So you're seeing the opportunities. You don't have to have the STEM background, although of course it helps when you have a partner that is a STEM person, which you'll hear about. But these days you can do vibe coding, you can do a lot of things with AI, basically doing a lot of your tech work that could really help, and outsourcing it. And what assets and skills? Yeah, research project, internships, amazing. Like this thing with the state's an internship for me, so or I'm not paid for it. But any way where you can get opportunities to like learn new skills, and the biggest thing is learning skills is amazing, and you can learn on the job, and that's really good too. You can also learn like from YouTube, and I learned a lot of stuff just researching online. But the thing you can't get from just AI and just YouTube is the connections. The networking is, if I had to say, the single biggest reason where we are where we're at, even being part of this program, was a connection that I made last year, and he's part of this program, Dylan. So the networking is huge, and they say your network is your net worth. I totally agree with that. So just try to put yourself out there, and believe it or not, I was a total introvert before. I still am, but I kind of go out, and I think it helps me to have more confidence to speak and talk to people when I feel like I have something, of value. I mean, I'm of value, sure, but when you have a product, when you have something you're working on, something you're passionate about, whatever it is, a research project or anything, that leaning on that kind of boosts up my confidence and ability to meet people and say, hey, I have something that might be of interest to you, might help you out, and that's how it starts the conversation. So, yeah, I just want to, that's a good place for me to hand it off to my partner, and yeah, thank you for listening.
You want to take that from me?
You want me to do it?
Thank you, Sean. My name is Mark. I'm Sean's dad. I don't know how Sean got into languages. That was never my thing. I'm a math guy. I'm an ME out of Berkeley. Started working at Lockheed, IBM. Was doing 3D scanners. I did logistics at Amazon. So language was always sort of a non-technical topic. So it was just a lot of memorization. When Sean started coming up with learning Japanese and we started getting into it, though, I found out that language is really key to everything. There's a lot to it. So AcquiLingua, where do we get that from? We kind of Romanized or Latinized acquire language. That's what it means. So we're not about teaching the language, we're about facilitating your acquisition of a language. So this is how I learned Spanish. Esta es una cuchara. And you get that word cuchara. And then cuchara, cuchara, cuchara. You repeat it over and over again. Okay? As many times as you can. You just sit there, you write it out as many times, 100 times, whatever it takes till you memorize it. And then pretty soon you're dreaming about it. Cuchara, cuchara, cuchara. This is another vocabulary word. Piscina. Esta es una piscina. How would we memorize this? A mnemonic. Don't just in a swimming pool. So the memorization that's required in learning language is daunting. And probably the biggest part about remembering things is forgetting things. This is our spaced repetition curve. And so what happens here is you learn something. You learn something new over here. Someone introduces themselves to you. You say their name. What happens? 30 seconds later, you don't know their name. So they tell you the name again. And now you're going to forget that name at a slower rate. So now you might know their name for an hour or two. And then if you are reminded of their name or you conjure it up in your mind and you actively think about it, then you'll remember it again. And every time you re-remember it, you're going to flatten out your forgetting. And so eventually, you won't be needed to be reminded of a vocabulary word for 2 or 3 weeks, but then once you are reminded of that word, it'll be months before you forget it. This is a hack. This is better than writing down the word 50 times. This is the kind of thing that can be automated by an application that knows when you learned a word and knows when is the optimum time to reteach you or remind you about that word. This is where like neuroscience comes into language. So if we're going to learn a bunch of words, that's what language learning is about, or that's a big part of it anyways. How many words do I need to know? So when we get into this whole esoteric discussion of what's fluency, what's proficiency, what's a useful amount of vocabulary to learn, if you take just people at different ages, a 4-year-old knows about 5,000 words. I don't know how many of you have had conversations with 4-year-olds, but they're pretty good. They can talk about a lot of things with a 4-year-old. Only 4,000 words. By the time you reach an adult, you're 5, 6, 7 times that. So if you were to be tested on your vocabulary and you were to be ranked in your knowledge of a language, you have some rankings here, 500 words for A1, 1,000 words for A2. When we get into the B1, B2 area, 2,000 to 3,000 words, that's about where Duolingo will let you off. And probably any other app. You're gonna get you about that far, which is not quite a 4-year-old, but it's a lot of ways there. And there's really no one there to pick you up after that point and move you farther along. We're shooting for the B2 C1 level. That's what we want to try to teach people. And where do we get that from? Well, it's actually University of Hawaii came up with this. One of the few studies that have ever been done on this is how many words do you need to know. We talked about fluency and proficiency. There's not really a hard, fast rule of how many words you need to be fluent. You might need 10,000 words. What the University of Hawaii came up with is, if you know about 5,000 words, then the words you don't know will be so infrequent that you'll be able to pick them up from the context of the other words you do know. This is where you can now start just accumulating words sort of in the wild, just in conversation. So someone says a new word to you, you don't know what that means, like you're talking to a teenager or something, they throw a new word at you, I don't know what that means, you hear it again, you kind of get an idea what it means, you hear it again, now you're using that word, you picked it up in the wild, no one told you what it meant, you didn't look it up in a dictionary, you have enough of the language that now you can start picking things up from context. That point is about 5,000 words. That's where we would like to get you to. You might be surprised, like, okay, if you're gonna learn 5,000 words, which ones? That's important to know. Hippopotamus versus cat and dog. Probably need to know cat and dog first. It turns out, like, there's only 207 words that they've come up with that they found in every language. That's not that many words. So, this is like, I was really surprised when I heard this. I would have thought that most languages, most of the words, they'd be translatable into another language. It's not like that. This is the fellow, Sean had him on one of his slides. Dr. Zip, he was a Harvard professor, and he was the first one that pretty much made a mathematical model for language. And what he did is he would have his students, I hope for extra credit, they would read through a chapter of a book, like Moby Dick, or War and Peace. And they would take that chapter and they would decompose it into the individual unique words that were used in that chapter, and then they would count how many times each one of those words was used. And then he would do this for an entire book, and then he would graph them in the order of the frequency. And he came up with this nice little curve here. And actually he's able to fit a formula to it. This is the first mathematical formula in language that I was aware of. This says that the frequency of a word is 1 over the rank. It means if you take the most common word and how often it's used, the second most common word is used half as often. And the third most common word is used a third as often. And you can go all the way down here until you find words that are only ever used like once. This curve is a very interesting curve because this is this is a graph of Romeo and Juliet on a linear graph. If you log it, it's a straight line. But this curve is the origin of the 80-20 rule. You all know the 80-20 rule comes up everywhere. 20% of the work gets you 80% of the way there, and then it takes 80% of the work to get you the rest of the way there, right? We see this all the time. This is the sweet spot right here. That's about 5,000 words. So I had no idea there was this sort of mathematics behind language. So fortunately for Dr. Zip's students, computers came around and they were able to digest novels and all of the corpus of like the internet, right? And figure out what are the most common words. This law, by the way, this works for any language. Every language has its own graph like this, even languages that aren't used anymore. So you can see there's a lot of words here that are like used all the time. They're not really constructive words, articles, prepositions, and so forth. But then there's some words that only ever get used. There's 50,000 words that are only ever used once in these lessons. So that's one aspect of STEM when it comes to language learning. Then recently, at my alma mater, they came up with this other concept that was mind-blowing. What they did is they took people and they put them in an MRI and they imaged their brain while they were listening to a story. And that story had keywords in it. And so they could figure out what part of the brain was being fired when they would hear certain words. And the first thing they were shocked about is that when the same word came up, the same voxel in the brain would light up. Which is not the way I would have thought it worked, but apparently that is the way it worked. They were able to map out on the human brain, voxel by voxel, where each word was. And one of the things that was interesting about this is they're able to organize all the words by topic. And those words are close to each other in your brain. Your brain is a semantic, organized dictionary of words. Formed with this. You're able to actually relate. These are the words about colors. These are the words about insects. Sure. These are the words about tools, furniture, common everyday things. The word for mother is right around in here, right next to the word for father. So everything is semantically related. It's almost as though our brains are pre-wired to have symbols put in them that represent that thing. So if it's an apple and you have an image of an apple, your brain will store that in that voxel in your brain that's already pre-assigned for apple. Or if you're a word in whatever language, that's going to go into that voxel. And this wasn't just for an individual. They took different people and they had the same locations in their brains, even in different languages. So this is almost like an innate ability that we have. So this is our godfather, our main influencer. This is the guy that gives us the methodology for how to acquire language. Dr. Krashen, Sean mentioned at USC, came up with the theory of comprehensible input. We'll hear from him in a minute, but basically he has 5 hypotheses when it comes to learning language. First one is one that we lean heavily on, is that you don't learn language, you acquire it. It's a subconscious thing. You can consciously learn things, but your real skills of language are subconscious. Monitor hypothesis is when you hear a child that communicates something to you, but they won't get the grammar quite right, or like her is hungry or something like that, or I knowed it, and they'll say it wrong. And as they educate themselves with grammar, they'll begin to hear what's the right way of saying things, what sounds right and what doesn't sound right. And this is where your monitor comes in and sort of like corrects you as you're speaking. Natural order hypothesis is that we learn things in a certain order. We learn present tense before we learn past tense or future tense. Input hypothesis is where if we're given a message, say a text message, if we know all of the words but one, we'll probably be able to figure out that one. If we don't know any of the words, we'll probably be lost. So it's sort of a progressive way of introducing vocabulary to people based on knowing what they already know and then feeding them the sort of the next most important word. And then the affect filter, you probably all know this. My first experience taking a physics exam at Berkeley, I took the test, I failed it. When I got the test back, I went home, I ordered a pizza, I sat down and I worked out the whole test and I would have gotten an A. But I was blocked, I was anxious, I was intimidated. So if you have that intimidation or that anxiety, you don't feel totally confident in your abilities, you sort of shut down. And that's a problem with instructors and tutors, as good as they might be. If you don't want to say something in a class and get it wrong and get embarrassed, this is where AI kind of comes in, where you can sort of talk freely with AI and you can make mistakes and you don't really feel self-conscious about it. So let's hear a little bit from Krashen about how we learn languages.
lessons. I'll use a language that I'm sure you've heard before, maybe some of you speak. And you can tell me which of these two very brief lessons you like better. Here's lesson number 1. Wir werden jetzt anfangen, Deutsch zu lernen. Und ich möchte voraussagen, dass nach meiner Meinung Deutsch ist eine sehr schöne Sprache. Und ich hoffe, dass Sie alle sehr viel Erfolg mit Deutsch haben werden. What do you think of lesson so far? You think if I get talking to you like that, you can pick up German? Not very likely. How about if I repeated it? Would that help? Probably not. How about if I said it louder? Would that help? Probably not. How about if I said it and you repeated it back? Again, I don't think that would help. How about if I wrote it out for you? You could see it on your television screen. That wouldn't help either. How about if I wrote it out for you and you copied it down? How about if I wrote it out for you and deleted every 5th word and you tried to guess what the word is? The truth is that none of these things help. None of these things mean anything, and I hope you can see that now. Here's lesson number 2. For this you have to watch me carefully. Das ist meine Hand. Verstehen Sie das, Hand? Everyone say, ja, I can hear you, even though it's TV audio. Good. Kopf. Das ist mein Kopf. Verstehen Sie Kopf? Ja. Gut. Kopf. You're out. Draw picture now. Kopf. Ist gut, ja? Sure. Kopf. Das ist Mr. Spock, ja? Mr. Spock hat 2 Ohren. Ohren. Verstehen Sie? Ohren. Er hat 2 Ohren. Okay, Mr. Spock. Ja, Augen. Verstehen Sie? Augen. Augen. Wie viele Augen? 1, 2, 3 Augen. 3 Augen. Ist das richtig? 3 Augen? Nein. Wir haben nur 2 Augen. Mund. Steht Sie Mund? Und hier ist eine Zigarette, ja. Nein. Zigaretten sind nicht gut. If you understood lesson number 2, not every word, but more or less, I did everything necessary to teach you German. And now I'm going to share with you the most important thing I have learned about language. Probably the best kept secret of the profession. We acquire language in one way, and only one way, when we understand messages. We call this comprehensible learning.
So this video was made in the 1980s, and that's still the gold standard for how to learn a language. But until AI, you couldn't scale that. That's a professor or a tutor, one-on-one, teaching you all these words, drawing pictures. But now we have AI, and now we can actually scale this. And this is what AcquiLingua is trying to do, is take this methodology and basically scale it through AI. And you'll notice that his first lesson is probably what you get if you go to ChatGPT and say, teach me Italian. It will just start talking to you a bunch in Italian. It's not going to be showing you pictures and actually teaching you the language. So, Madurese, that's the way we learned our native language. That's the way we want you to learn your next language. How does it work? Well, first of all, you have like some storybook with pictures. Mom's reading a story and saying, here's the chicken, and here's the fence, and here's the apple. And then after a while, you can ask the child, and this is IPA, by the way, this is how you pronounce it, where's the apple? And the child will point to the apple. They haven't developed the linguistic skills to say it yet, but in their mind, they know what that sound is, and they know what the picture is associated with it. And then eventually, the mom can just point to an image and say, what's this? The child will say, apple. And that's sort of what we want to automate through our app. Okay, yeah, let's do a little brief demo of our app. Look at that. This is an older version. I'll just talk to what this is doing. We're going to have the volume. So basically, it's a chat user interface. You have a microphone. You can either type in words or you can speak to it. And it will respond to you, and you see that it's inserting some emojis into the conversation.
I use
basically,
natural conversations and understandable messages to help you acquire languages.
so
What technology?
I use Dr. Stephen Krashen's comprehensible input methodology.
Here's the fact that I'm sure you have colleges you go for.
this is a little bit of an esoteric part of the application where we show you exactly how to pronounce each of the sounds in IPA. This is how you can become recognized when you try to speak French. And then this is how we do our games. It's not a multiple choice. We use a lot of emojis. You actually have to say the word, so you have to recall the word. It's not a matter of recognizing the word. We're trying to get you to actively learn these words. And this is all in English. I think we'll show you Japanese here in a minute.
Now it's asking Japanese about the process for our language.
私たちの言語学習アプリは成功すると思いますか？
もちろんです。あなたのアプリは多くの人が自然に言語を習得するのを助けます。
And transliteration in IPA is critical.
もちろんです。あなたのア
Or
プ
we
リ
can
は
show you
多くの人が
translations, and we can show you how to pronounce it, so you can follow along as you're listening to it, and you sort of learn IPA as you go. So you don't really even need to learn the script of the language. You can learn everything through IPA. These are some future things that we have. This is a semantically related dictionary, sort of like the brain map that I showed you from UC Berkeley. We take a word, we'll show you a bunch of related words. It'll show you their frequency, it'll show you all the possible definitions of that word. And then another aspect of AI is basically image recognition. A lot of people will put like post-its on things around their house. This is the refrigerator, this is the microwave. Here you can just take your camera and look around and it'll tell you what those things are in your target language. So, that was our first release. Basically, you converse in a language, and it's going to try to give you as much comprehensible input through emojis as possible. And the feedback that we've gotten so far is that if you're sort of a middle learner to an advanced learner, it's really useful to you because it's a good practice partner, and you can basically just start speaking in your language and get more and more familiar with it, comfortable with it. But new learners didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to start. They weren't bootstrapped. So it's like, okay, let's have a conversation in Japanese, and they'd have no idea what to say. So part of what we're going to be doing now, and if any of you want to join us as interns, these will be the kind of the projects we're working on going forward, is bootstrapping people based on your native language and your target language. So in a lot of languages, like Spanish, you already know a whole lot of words in Spanish. Like, there's a lot of words that you already know in Spanish. So say you're 20% of the way there already before you even begin. So, and this is true for other languages too. So for example, French and English are very common. Things are pronounced differently, but they're pretty much spelled the same. And Japanese as well. It's almost 50% loan words between English and Japanese. Pronounced completely differently, but you'll recognize them. So one of the things that we do for comprehensible input is we use a lot of emojis. The examples you saw was having AI just put emojis in, but that was not deterministic, so we wanted to have like the same emojis for a given word. And for like a lot of words, it's really pretty simple. Cat and dog, we already have universal emojis everyone recognizes. You can even get into really kind of specialty words like poodle or guide dog, and there's an emoji for that. But there's not an emoji for a lot of different words, like for breakfast. So we will put together different emojis as a sort of a grapheme or pictogram to convey the message, but then you can see here that there might be some cultural differences that we might need to be aware of. And sometimes people get our emoji pictograms, and sometimes they're a little bit confused about it. So one of the things that we want to do is start using AI to make our own set of emojis for those 5,000 most valuable words. and to make those as recognizable as possible, and hopefully get them to be a standard in the emoji dictionary. And another idea we have is to produce images like a child's storybook, where, let me show the next slide, we kind of have like a backdrop, and we can have characters that we drop in. And so if we had sort of prefab storylines, and as you're conversing with the AI, it could be dropping in pictures about the story that you guys are talking about. And this is the sort of thing where, when you're talking about AI generating images, and then there's an economic threshold there, it costs a lot more to generate images. So what we're thinking is creating a catalog of backdrops and common characters that we can kind of have AI just drop into any story. So it's not really generating images, it's more looking up a dictionary of, oh, what we're talking about now is a zoo, and we're having popcorn near the elephant exhibit, and we can just drop all of those features into a picture with prefab pictures, basically. So, pop quiz. Does anyone know? I remember we've repeated it like 40 times. How about this one? How about a clue? So with one mnemonic, that replaces repeating the word 50 times. So I'll leave you with this. A man who speaks 3 languages is trilingual. A man who speaks 2 languages is bilingual. A man who speaks only 1 language is English. Thank you.
Okay, so I will turn this back over if there's any questions. I know they've got a QR code up here if you would like to give the app a try. But if you would now that we've completed our workshop, if you could go back to that survey and go to the second page, the post-workshop survey. And these questions are going to be very similar, and they are answered in the same way on the continuum between strongly agreed and strongly disagreed. The first question is, as a result of this workshop, I understand what emerging technology fields are. As a result of the workshop, I'm more likely to pursue an emerging technology pathway. As a result of this workshop, I see how emerging technology fields are applicable in employing. As a result of this workshop, I understand what emerging technology jobs are available. As a result of this workshop, I see how Indigenous knowledge can be applied in an emerging technology field. And then the next few questions are on the final page for our external evaluator. So if you go to the third page now, the technical topics presented in the ExLENT Inspire workshop I attended interested me. And again, please just answer on the same continuum here. Work at this company or partner organization connects to issues of concern and relevance to people in Hawaii. Non-technical skills such as teamwork, collaboration, and communication that are relevant to work at this company or partner organization were addressed today. Based on what you heard in today's workshop, do you think you would be interested in applying for a summer internship with this company or partner organization? And the last question that we've got is open-ended, but if there's any type of technology or any particular company that you would like to see a presentation from, I would love to hear that feedback so that I can work on trying to bring them in and to provide content that you would find useful and engaging. So I appreciate everybody who's here and who's taking the time to fill this out. And lastly, we have several more workshops that are coming up next week. 3R Water will be here. There's also a costume contest that day, if I'm not mistaken, and I believe there may be some prizes from the STEM Center. Is that, Ian, do I have that right? Costume contest in here?
Yes.
On the 30th. So please come, please wear a costume. If you have any suggestions for my costume, I'm all ears because I don't know what to dress up as. And then we've got Hawaii Green Growth coming in November. Our space will be coming in. They're a maker space. Lulu Live will be joining us toward the end of the month. They're doing some really interesting stuff with remote sensing in free diving and scuba diving environments. And I am still attempting to get the Department of Law Enforcement scheduled. They may be a next semester thing, but we'll see. Fingers crossed. But there's lots of STEM and emerging technology topics that we still have coming up this semester. And so I'm going to go back now. This is our QR code for our website, and if you email me at all, I'll give it to you also. But I am going to go back to the QR code that Sean and Mark have, just in case you do want to download their app and give that a try. And I appreciate you guys being here.